Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us to learn more about PKD Foundation's ADPKD Patient Registry. I am Nicole Haar, the Director of Community Engagement at the PKD Foundation, and I will be your host throughout the webinar. Joining me on the panel is Geraldina Ferenczi, our Community Outreach Specialist, and she will be helping out with the Q&A. We also have Chris Risconi, our Chief Research Officer, on the panel as well. We'll get started with the presentation in just a moment, but first I have a few announcements. All attendees will remain muted throughout the presentation to ensure good audio quality for all the viewers. We are recording the webinar and will post the recording on our website within the next few days. If you have questions during the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A box located on your control panel at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session immediately following the presentation, and also you can feel free to use the chat feature as well. This session is designed for informational purposes only and will not include information on the treatment and diagnosis of PKD. As you listen to the information, if it sparks questions for you regarding treatment, you are encouraged to speak with your medical professional. I am delighted to introduce you to our speaker, Elise Hoover. Elise is the Director of Research at the PKD Foundation. She led the design and implementation of the ADPKD Registry, along with members of the clinician, researcher, and patient communities. Before joining the PKD Foundation, Elise worked as a clinical research coordinator at Tufts Medical Center on PKD studies such as Reprise, the tolvaptan clinical trial, as well as held an epidemiology fellowship at the National Cancer Institute. She's excited to be able to contribute to patient-centered research in her position at the PKD Foundation. Elise, welcome, and I'm turning this over to you.
Thanks, Nicole. First slide, I have no applicable disclosures. Okay, so we are here to talk about the ADPKD Registry annual report. This is all the data we collected in our first year. And as you saw, we have Chris here with us as well. He helps me with the program. So before we get into what our registry looks like, I wanted to talk to you about why the foundation chose to build a registry. So basically, this is a database. It's a collection of people who have a particular disease. In this case, that's autosomal dominant PKD. And I wanted to compare that with something that's a little more of a classic research study, which is a clinical trial. So registry, there are no limits to the kinds of ADPKD patients we want in this registry. We don't restrict it by age or gender or even stage of disease. And by contrast, a clinical trial is usually pretty limited and has very specific characteristics they're looking for in their participants. Another thing that's great about this program is that we intend for it to continue to grow as long as people are willing to sign up and participate. In a clinical trial, there's usually a set number of participants, and eventually, once it fills up, it'll close. We also have a lot of great flexibility in the kinds of data that we can collect. If we see new research questions, we can add new modules to a registry. Usually a clinical trial is, again, predefined at the beginning with their research questions and with the kinds of data they're collecting. But one thing that's really important that's similar between these two is that idea of privacy of data. So participant identifiable information is separated from the study data. So we try to keep that confidential. And then, of course, there are different kinds of registries. You may already be a part of a registry at your local clinic or at your academic institution. Traditional registries are largely based on medical record data. There's very little that you would do in that registry aside from just signing up and consenting to participate. And then all those outcomes are based off of lab tests, other observations from your clinician. But what we have, we like to call it a patient-powered registry. And so this means that we are getting our data from patients. We rely pretty heavily on patients engaging with us because we need your data. And we get to use what are called patient-reported outcomes, which is data that we can only get from the patient about their perspective, about their disease journey, about their quality of life. All right, so in the Foundation's history, we focus largely on funding grants and supporting researchers, and this is really the first program that we've launched to do our own research. So it was launched on PKD Awareness Day in 2019, and we were very lucky that we planned this to be a remote participation, hosted entirely online, so there's no need for anyone to go into the clinic in person to submit their data. And the program has two goals. One was to create a tool that helps us better understand the PKD patient journey and some of the things that patients are going through. But the secondary goal is to help connect patients to clinical trials so that we're not only serving our own research goals, but we're also helping the broader field of PKD research. And really the idea of this is to advance PKD research, but using that patient voice as our main tool. Okay, so far we have over 1,900 people signed up, which is super exciting for us. And I talked about really using that patient voice as our guide. So the registry is patient powered because we are getting data from patients, but we also consider it patient centered because we have been very deliberate to include ADPKD patients on our advisory board, on our working groups for new modules, and then also to beta test those modules before they're released to the broader participant group. And then of course that remote participation, we try to make it easy for you to participate on your phone, on your computer, on your tablet. And so yeah, we're hoping that it's really easy to interact with. Okay, so what's really key for us is what we call longitudinality, which is understanding how that patient journey is going to change over time. And that means that we ask everyone participating to contribute data multiple times a year. So these are our modules that are currently in the registry. At sign up, we ask everyone to fill out the core and the diet and lifestyle module. And those are going to be repeated once a year. And the family history module, you also get when you first sign in. But you just fill it out once, and then hopefully, if anything changes in your family, you'll go in and update that. 3 months later, we have our 2 quality of life modules. That's the impact scale and the pain and discomfort scale. And those are quarterly, and I'll share with you a little later why those are so much more frequent than the others. Then 6 months in, you'll get the experience with liver cysts and the vascular outcomes. Those are also once a year modules. And we have some great opportunities with the registry to create some time-limited modules, which means that we will ask them for a while and then we will take them out of the registry once they're no longer relevant. So right now we have that COVID-19 impact. We are hoping that we will not have to measure that impact for very long, but right now it's every 6 months. Okay, so this is something really important to us. I mentioned that we wanted to have a design similar to a clinical trial where we take that privacy and confidentiality very seriously. So when we launched this, we partnered with IQVIA, which is a company, and their whole job is to help collect and keep safe data for research and projects like ours. So basically the portal that someone would log in to participate, it's super secure, it's run by IQVIA. As soon as you sign up, the portal automatically gives you this 12-digit number letter random unique ID, and that's where all your answers will be recorded. We then store anything that could identify you, like your name, your address, your phone number. That's stored separately in a very secure place, and then all of your data is instead put next to that unique ID identifier. And then we get to share that de-identified data with our advisory panels and talk about the research questions we can answer and how we can share it. And we didn't just make this up. So these are based off of rules from the NIH, the FDA. There's a law called HIPAA. We have an ethics review board who reviews our protocol and everything about the research. And the only person who can access and connect your data to your name is a very unique person on our team who is specially trained, happens to be me. And that's only in very specific situations. So if you had any technical issues signing in or any comments about the modules, that would have been those would come to me, and then I would be able to connect those two. But again, very specific situations, otherwise it's kept separate. All right, so finally, let's talk about the annual report. We are hoping that we'll create one of these, intending to create one of these every year. So this is our first one. It's based off of data from 2020, also a little into 2019, because that's when we launched. And you'll see a lot of figures and tables in here, but the thing that is really exciting to me are these participant testimonials. This was a suggestion from our patient advisory group, and it's really just about putting this data into context about why it's important to patients' lives and to their experiences. All right, so here are what our participants look like. They are throughout the United States. We have a wide variety of disease stages. We have some people who are post-kidney transplant on dialysis, and then quite a few whose PKD kidneys are still functioning. And we have a pretty predominantly female and white set of participants. And although we really value every single person who joins our registry and who participates, we are making an effort this year to increase the gender and racial diversity of our program. And I have over here that we have 1,900 enrolled, but about 3/4 are engaged. And what engaged to us means is that they are logging in and they're filling out our modules, not just once, but multiple times a year. And so that is what's really giving us this data that we're seeing in the report. So thank you to everyone who's been participating. Okay, the ADPKD impact scale. This is one of the 2 quality of life outcome measures we have. And what's really exciting about this is it was designed specifically for use in ADPKD patients. So a lot of quality of life measures are designed for a specific disease, such as cancer is really popular. And then sometimes they don't always translate as well into other diseases. So this was made, water. This was made specifically for ADPKD patients. It measures physical and emotional impact and also fatigue. And because this only asks people to reflect back on the last 7 days, we try to ask it more frequently, so quarterly, and that will help us really understand the impact over time of these on the PKD patient journey. Okay, and so what we see here, this is everyone answering this for the very first time. And we can start to see kind of how these answers differ based on what stage of disease you're in, what your kidney function looks like. And these are the kind of patterns that we're really interested in, especially to see how they change over time on an individual level. Okay, oh, so this is the other one that was designed specifically for ADPKD by the same set of researchers. And this looks at pain, both sharp and dull pain, and then also discomfort related to PKD, and again, over the past 7 days. So just a short amount of time. And we can see that there is some real differences in the ways pain impact a patient's daily life. So we're really interested to see what that looks like in a single point in time, and then also how it changes and how it changes based on other questions you're answering in the registry. Family history. Okay, this is the original patient-reported outcome. This is something that's very hard to get out of a medical record. So we ask questions about your family members and their experience with the disease. We ask if there is a parent on a certain side who was affected. Many people didn't know their family history, which is consistent with what genetics tells us. So, you know, the mutated gene, an affected parent has a 50% chance of passing that on to their child. But what we want to know is, what do families actually look like? Are we seeing a family with 4 children where it's two who are affected by PKD and 2 are not? Or does it look different? And so we hear a lot of stories about this, about what families look like, but this will help us actually capture this in a standardized way and start looking at patterns. Diet and lifestyle. This one is really interesting for us. You know, we all know there's no specific diet recommended for PKD, but of course, as your disease progresses, you'll have recommendations from your clinician to change your diet. And what we saw here were a lot of people, not surprisingly, were restricting their salt, their sodium intake, also potassium and protein. So these patterns are really interesting for us to observe in real people, especially as we see research progressing. The foundation itself, we're funding 2 studies right now in the keto diet and also intermittent fasting. So we're interested in this. We know that the patient community is interested in this, and we just have a lot to learn. All right, liver cysts. I don't have to tell you this, although it's called polycystic kidney disease, kidneys are not the only organ impacted, right? So we know that a lot of people are experiencing issues with the liver. We asked in our core questionnaire, and 31% of people said that they have a diagnosis of polycystic liver disease, and 69% said that they have cysts on their liver. So that's quite a lot of people who are impacted by this. And we're asking questions about the symptoms that are believed to be associated, and it looks like there's a big impact on quality of life from this extra renal manifestation or outside of the kidney effect. And we're breaking it down based on by polycystic liver disease or just liver cysts. We're interested to see if that changes anything, if that diagnosis changes anything with those quality of life outcomes. So that's what we've broken down here. And what's really interesting for me on this is as we start to understand what the impacts of the disease look like, we can start to understand what an ideal PKD care team looks like. So what kind of specialists should a patient expect to have access to? Is just a nephrologist enough? Do we need to insist that clinicians have access to liver specialists, hepatologists, and that kind of thing? So it's really going to help us understand how we can make sure patients access the best care for their disease. Oh, and also what's great about this, so we have a lot of modules, and we ask you to fill them out pretty frequently. And one of the ways we're trying to limit that email fatigue is to, whenever possible, only send out modules to the people it applies to. So for example, in the core, only the people who answered that they had liver cysts or PLD were sent this module. And so we're hoping that anyone it didn't apply to didn't receive it, and they didn't have to answer it. And so we try to do that with all of our surveys if possible, make sure that we are paying attention to the answers we're getting and sending you modules that apply to your disease. Okay, so research recruitment. This is that secondary goal of the program that I mentioned before. So a lot of this is based on the core, and what we can do is we can look at your answers to that module and start matching different people with different kinds of studies and sending information about those studies to those individuals in case they'd like to participate. So these are 3 that we helped recruit for in 2020. The Freedom Transplant Study, we sent that to anyone who reported a kidney function that looked like they were nearing needing a transplant. The Nutrition Study at Denver, we looked at people who had a higher kidney function and it was still at their native PKD kidneys. We sent them information about that study. And then we had some graduate students at St. Louis University interested in that decision-making around dialysis. Sorry, my screen popped up. And so we sent anyone who indicated that they were on dialysis information about that study. And what's really important about this for us is we don't want to send patient information to these researchers. We want to identify the patients who might be relevant to and send those patients information about the study, and then it's up to them if they want to reach out to the researchers. That's really important. We definitely want to make sure research is accessible, to people, but we don't want to keep that confidentiality between us. Okay, so that's some of the things in the annual report. You'll receive a copy of it after this, and so please read and enjoy. I do just want to talk about a few other things now that you know what we're looking at, talk about why we're excited about this for PKD research. So basically, we're hoping that this registry opens doors for more and better research. And some of the challenges that we see in PKD research in general, there's the limited understanding of the disease progression And the ADPKD Registry allows us to follow lots of people, lots of different kinds of people over time and watch that progression, especially around quality of life. Patients in the US are spread out over a pretty large geographic area. In our registry, people are reporting being seen in over 400 different clinics. But the registry is nationwide, it's centralized, and we're not restricted to a certain city or a certain clinic. And so we get to combine all that data into one database. There are always challenges with data ownership, data sharing, and research. So we've designed this so that we can share de-identified information with researchers to answer questions. It's the whole point of this. And then often, especially in clinical trials or clinical studies, it takes a long time to test those therapies because it takes a long time to fill up those studies and recruit for them. So that, of course, delays new treatments. And we're hoping that by helping connect patients to studies they're eligible for, that will help accelerate that process. All right, longitudinality again, I know, but this is just so important to us. And now that you know some of the questions we're asking, I wanted to give some examples of how this is going to be really helpful. So, of course, having a large data set that researchers can observe and watch for changes and patterns, that's important. And some specific examples are core. A year after you first fill it out, we'll ask it again. And we're looking for changes in your kidney function, new cysts perhaps that were found in ultrasounds. If you have liver cysts, we'll send you that other module, maybe changes in clinical trial eligibility. Those quality of life, like the impact scale, we're interested to see how that changes. Maybe if those issues resolve or get worse. And then the liver cyst module, perhaps we'll see some changes there as well, new symptoms, new treatments started, et cetera. So it's really helpful for us to know your most recent health experiences in this program. Okay, here's actually a couple more ways that you can see the data that we're learning in the registry, especially as it applies to you. So here is when someone logs in, we have a dashboard, and that will reflect some of the data that we're learning from the modules. An example on the bottom right, we have that feeling exhausted or fatigued pie chart. And this person said that they were not bothered at all. And so that part of the pie chart is highlighted. And so we just want to kind of show you where your answers compare to others in that way. And then we try to change those a few times a year as well to keep it fresh. Okay, and then we also have a quarterly newsletter. So the next one will go out in May. And what we'll do here is we'll add some things that we're learning, and we'll talk about why that's important and what that impact looks like. And then we'll also share what's coming up, some successes, what we're excited about, and leave with a call to action. And this one and also the dashboard, these are very exclusive to participants. The annual report we're sending out to our entire community, but we want to make sure that we have some things that are special just for people who are participating. But that doesn't mean you're definitely welcome to share them. Please do with family or affected friends and show them what kind of things you're experiencing in the registry and encourage them to participate as well. Okay, we have 2 new modules coming. So the vascular outcomes, that was actually released about a month ago. So if you are in our program, please go fill out those questions. We want to understand things about brain, chest, and abdominal aneurysms. And we know that there's an increased risk for these events in PKD patients. So what we're interested in are the screening practices recommended by clinicians, treatment history, symptoms and recovery if someone has had an aneurysm, and then also family history. And that's going to be an annual module. And then this one is currently under development, but it's close. This is our healthcare access and utilization module. And we put this together with our advocacy team. And basically the foundation really wants to know what kind of care PKD patients are experiencing, what kind of specialists they're seeing, if there are any challenges accessing medications or scans or other medical care. And then if someone has had dialysis or a transplant, what was that experience like? And the vascular outcomes data actually will be featured in the May quarterly newsletter, so keep an eye out. All right, this is for anyone who has not signed up for our program yet. I just wanted to walk you through what it looks like to sign up. So this is the login page. Just go to the bottom, first time to the registry, and it'll take you to these four steps. So first we ask for name, email, and login info for the portal. And we then go into date of birth and diagnosis. So basically anyone of any age is welcome to sign up. If you're under 18, we ask you to have your parent with you when you sign up. And parents, if you have someone who doesn't know how to use the keyboard yet or can't answer our modules yet themselves, please help them sign up as well and answer those questions for them. Okay, and then of course we ask for address and location. And the last page is the consent, and this is a small window compared to the amount of content that's here. So I recommend going here and clicking download so you can see the full consent in your browser window. And this really just talks about what participation looks like, goals of the program, privacy and confidentiality, that kind of thing. And once you hit register, that's not the end. We need everyone to validate their email address. It's just an authorization step. And after you do that, you're officially signed up and you'll start getting emails about the modules. All right, we have a really fantastic group of people working with us on this program. We have our registry advisory committee made up of a bunch of really fantastic researchers and clinicians. We have our patient advisory group, and they just do so much to help us make sure we're returning value to participants. We also have our team at the foundation. This is definitely not comprehensive, so some of the people working with us day to day. And then, of course, our team at IQVIA who help us make sure this data is collected well and it is stored securely. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, everyone. We could not talk about this data without people submitting the answers to our modules and participating in research, so thank you. As I said, after the webinar, you'll receive a copy of the annual report, so please enjoy. And if you have not yet signed up, please sign up with us. If you are already part of the program, make sure you're signing in and filling out those modules. And here's contact info. If you have any technical issues or comments, please email us here. And also, we always love feedback, so feel free to reach out regardless. All right, any questions?
Thank you, Elise. We do have a couple of questions. Let me get this open here so I can read them to you. So the first one is, what's the difference between a diagnosis of PLD and liver cysts?
Sure. Well, that really depends on the clinician. Often PLD has very specific criteria for when it's considered a diagnosis as opposed to just some cysts on the liver. So it's really just comes down to that clinician and the diagnosis.
Okay. Next question. How does participation in the registry compare to your expectations at the start of the project?
I'm sorry, Nicole, would you repeat that? It broke up for a second.
Sure. The question is, how does participation in the registry compare to what your expectations were at the beginning of the project?
Oh, wow. Completely blown away. Absolutely. Just from the moment we launched the program in September, almost 2 years ago, people were so supportive and were willing to share their data with us. And it's been really, really fantastic.
That's awesome news. How were participants able to provide testimonials? So I think this relates back to where you mentioned that you had some patient testimonials. How did you get those?
Sure. Yeah, this first year, it was mostly outreach to people who had reached out to me before with comments or feedback. We had a couple of those that were open text responses to some of our modules that just really, really pulled us in and were really interesting and really made us think about the impact of some of this data. And so some of that was submitted through a module as well.
Okay. How are the patient advisory group members selected?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. As we were designing this program, we had some patients who were already engaging with us, and we thought it would be a really great fit to help us as we were thinking through this program. I think in the future, we will be asking for applications for people who are interested in serving on that committee. It's been so valuable and we definitely don't want to risk missing anyone. Might be a really great contribution for us. So if you are interested, please reach out to me and we can talk about it.
Okay, thank you. Here's a great question. Can you register from Australia?
Oh, I wish. Right now we're just in the United States. But yeah, I wish we could expand internationally. We're not quite ready for that yet. The PKD Foundation of Australia has some really great resources and some great research going on there. And if you want to go ahead and email me, I can connect you with that foundation if you're not already connected. But yeah, at the moment, we're just in the US for this registry.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the level of security? So what is the level of security, and how do we make sure that information is not breached?
Sure, that's a really fantastic question. And we were concerned about that as well, which is why we reached out to IQVIA. That's their entire reputation and their entire work is making sure that data is secure. They have a lot of different things in place to protect those data sets from breaches. They have never had a breach, knock on wood. And so we really trust them with that data. And part of the process that we implemented was, again, that separating identifiable information from the rest of the data in the registry. So really restricting who has access to that, who can match those together. And, and of course we have an ethics review board who also reviews all those processes, and they've given us a gold star. So we get to check in with them once a year and make sure that we're still doing all the right things to protect that data.
Okay. How are registry participants alerted about potential eligibility for clinical trials?
Yeah, we send an email through the portal. And the reason that we do it that way is that the portal can make that connection between your responses in the data and your email address. Otherwise, we don't want to connect those two together because we want to keep them separate. So what we'll do, when we have a new study who's enrolling, we will look through, usually it's the answers to the core questionnaire, and we'll select people based on their answers there and put those unique IDs into the system, and they'll send information about the study. And we also, at the foundation, we have a clinical studies page that lists any ongoing studies that we're aware of, definitely in the US. We also try to include those in the UK and Canada as well. It's hard to keep track of the rest of the world, but please check that out. And if you want to see what is available at the moment, there's a great list there.
Okay. Here's a really good question. Any thoughts about tracking outcomes for transplant patients, those that have had kidney transplants and or liver transplants, outcomes such as, or information such as drug protocols, duration of transplant, issues with transplant, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And it's a lot of really, a lot of needed research questions in that area. I know we only have, sometimes it feels like a lot, but we only have 7 modules right now in the registry, and we're always looking for new research questions and new opportunities to add new data. So we rely on our patient advisory group and our larger registry advisory group to help us decide what to ask next. So, I told you we have that healthcare access module, which looks at some of the transplant outcomes from that whole process. And, we have some other questions we want to ask about pain. And so as fast as we can get them out and as fast as you want to answer them, we'll be including those in the registry. But right now, we don't have any other post-transplant related questions in the queue. But please, if you have ideas or experiences you want to share and you want us to consider creating questions for, please email me. We're always interested in that.
Okay. Next question. What steps are you thinking about taking to bridge the gap between the number of registry participants and the number that are engaged?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. We've been thinking about this a lot in the advisory groups and just at the foundation. And we're working on a lot of strategies. I think what's really interesting about that liver module is that we saw a pretty fantastic response in people answering that. And we're wondering if it's because it was eligibility limited. And we only sent that module to people who indicated that they had liver cysts. And so maybe we need to focus more on, explaining why we're sending people these modules and what we want to learn, and see if that makes someone more likely to engage. Of course, we're always interested in your feedback on the emails you receive, or whether you think a module is applicable to you. And I wonder if it comes down to messaging and explaining the impact. Maybe it's something else. So we're going to do some trial and error. We're going to think through how we can better reach out and ask people to fill out those modules, and I guess we'll see what works.
What about, let's see, when might you have some results on studies on diet?
Ooh, in general, that's a tough one. Chris, do you want to answer that?
And I guess there's probably two sides of that. I don't know if we're talking about outcomes in the registry for the module, but also studies. So
yeah, that's what I was wondering when I saw that question. I mean, the studies that the foundation is currently funding are on, they're on their own trajectory and time scale, and so we don't specifically know when they're going to have readouts. In this data, I would think that probably what we need is longitudinal data, probably over a 3 to 5 year time frame at least, to start to understand if how diet choices correlate with outcome, and then obviously being able to understand how that relates to the disease status at baseline. So I would say probably from our data, it's probably a 3 to 5 year time horizon. From the studies we're funding, I don't believe, at least, that we have a clear view of their timeline. Clearly, the study in Cologne on keto and the study at Colorado on intermittent fasting are both enrolling well. And I off the top of my head, I can't remember the duration of those studies, but they were 1 year studies or longer.
They're 1 year studies. Of course, it all depends on how quickly they enroll. And so one of those studies is one that we had directed registry participants to last year. We saw a really great response. And that's really our goal here, is the quicker we can fill up these studies, the quicker they can get the protocol done, and the quicker we can get results. And that's one of the motivators we have for that part of the program. But once they are completely filled up, it will be about a year to 14 months before they are done collecting data.
Okay, thanks for that answer. So I want to go back to a minute to the question that was asked about PLD and kidney and liver transplant. So this is maybe just more about ideas for future.
Sure.
Also tracking incidents and procedures used for bilateral nephrectomies, post or pre-transplant, difference in outcome. So just wanted to share that before I forgot. Here's a good question. Will you be collecting any data on mental and emotional health of patients?
Yeah, it's a really great one. We're hoping that the impact scale will help us collect some of that data. We also have a COVID-19 impact module that I mentioned that asks about mental health associated with the pandemic. There are definitely a lot of questions that are really important and that we need to ask. And so again, I'd be super interested in anyone reaching out with ideas, especially as we look at that impact scale and see what we're learning and what we're still missing and need to know.
Okay. And here's a question about additional non-kidney specific medical issues. Would you be collecting any data on such as menopause or any other non-kidney related issues for PKD patients?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we focused initially on liver cysts and aneurysms because those are two of the more common issues that we see in PKD patients, but we definitely want to understand the full spectrum of the disease and the full disease experience. So we, as research questions come in, we'll be adding more of those questions. One of the great things about this program is, right now, all of the modules have been included by the foundation because they are of real interest to us and our advisory board. But we're hoping that as this program grows, we'll open up the opportunity for researchers to submit their own questions and to add new questions to the registry based on very specific research questions that they want to answer. And so we'll have opportunities to add all kinds of questions based on studies. So yeah, I wish we could chug them out faster. But that's one of the great things about a registry is we have that flexibility to continue to add those kind of modules.
Okay. Can you address any steps that are being taken to increase the diversity in the registry? So what are we working on to help with that issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we're thinking about a lot at the foundation. We have, Chris, do you want to answer this? I'm not sure how much you'd like me to say.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think it takes two forms. One is certainly from the specific view of the registry. We're working to understand through some basically qualitative research projects what's driving engagement with the foundation and the registry, and what are the barriers particularly focused on race and ethnicity as part of that. And then I think there's the broader issue of, is the foundation engaging broadly and serving the full scope of patients with PKD, and how do we as a foundation build broader trust within the full community of patients who have PKD? And we see these things as interrelated. And so on the one hand, we're doing some qualitative research that's registry specific, and on the other hand, we're starting to look really closely at how the foundation broadly engages the community, because we see the registry participation probably is related to who the foundation is really engaging with, and so we're trying to approach that on both fronts.
Okay,
that's
thank
helpful.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, very. Thank you.
We're also, sorry, I probably should mention that we are currently recruiting for focus groups to help us better understand some of these challenges. The foundation has put out a few posts on our Facebook and social media. But yeah, if you're interested or know someone who would be interested in that focus group, we know that we still have a lot to learn about the barriers in the community. And so we're hoping that's one of the ways that we'll learn and find out how we can change the program and make it better.
Okay, thank you. The next question, will you be collecting data on stem cell clinical studies pertaining to kidney transplant to eliminate the need for immunosuppressive drugs?
Not at this time. We know there are research studies on this, and our biggest priority right now is to help recruit for those studies and share information about that research with people who might be eligible. But we don't have any modules in the pipeline yet with those kind of questions.
Okay, here's a great question. Are there any studies planned to determine if exercise can slow down the progression of ADPKD?
Exercise is one of the things that we ask about in our diet and lifestyle module. So the first goal there is to identify the patterns that we see in the community, and then we can share that data with our researchers and start seeing how we can act on it and how we can learn from it. So that's our first step, is to get data in that diet and lifestyle module.
Okay, here's the next question. Would it be of value to study transplant protocols in PKD patients? So this patient shared that he got his transplant as part of clinical trial with great success. Take only one anti-rejection medication, no steroids.
That's fantastic. I would love to hear more about that study. Again, it's one of those areas that will grow as we see the treatment and therapeutic pipeline growing, so that we can answer those questions later down the line. Of course, right now, if it's in a clinical trial, we have to wait for the results of that trial before we can create our own research questions about what it looks like in an individual's journey. But I'm really glad to hear you had that experience. And if you wouldn't mind sending me the name of that study, I'd be really interested in looking into it.
Does the registry have a way to indicate if someone registered and is no longer able to participate?
So when trying to understand that gap between someone signing up and someone engaging and filling out the modules, we did look at those that seemed to register but not validate their email. And we tried to reach out to those. I worry it's a spam box issue, and maybe all of our emails are just going to spam. And then I'm sure occasionally maybe the email address is mistyped, or there's an error there and we're just not reaching people. So unfortunately, until that person is able to receive emails from the portal, there's no other way that we can ethically reach out to you. Even if I see, if I can go in the back end and see someone's name and maybe I know them or I know they're in our community, we're not going to reach out any other way but that portal, because we take that process really seriously. So if you did register and you never heard anything, never got an email, reach out to me and we can connect you that way. Or register again, that'd be great.
Here's a great question. Are all clinical trials age limited?
Usually, yes. It really depends on what they're trying to study. We see a lot of PKD clinical trials right now trying to access patients that are at risk for rapid progression, which means you are, a certain stage in your disease, and someone who is maybe older and has really great kidney function might not be progressing at the rate that they need to see an impact of the therapy in the short time the clinical trial goes on. There also, of course, are ethical regulations around children participating in studies, so most will have a minimum and a maximum age.
Okay, and we do have a couple more questions, but a comment also that I want to share. I learned a lot about the disease that I didn't even know, such as commonality of aneurysms, just by viewing the registry and completing the modules. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
Nice comment. Have you thought about reaching out to family members of those with PKD to assess emotional and physical impact?
Yeah, absolutely. The impact of PKD on the caregiver and on family members is super important. Right now the registry is just for people who are affected by ADPKD through a diagnosis, but we definitely recognize that there are a lot of other research questions out there about caregivers. And at the moment, right now, we have our resources through PKD Connect that we hope will be helpful to caregivers and family members and friends. And in the future, I could imagine if there is a caregiver study, we might reach out to registry participants to ask if they're caregivers or friends or family we want to participate. So that's probably the most relevant interaction we have at the moment. But I agree, there's some really important research questions there.
Yeah. I also had another comment from someone that is also on a lower protocol of immunosuppressive drugs. Shared that. So we have one more question, and when you still have some time, if you have more questions you want to enter them in, please do so. The last question we have right now is, was the PKD Foundation involved in referring patients to the Johns Hopkins study that's trying to understand antibody levels in PKD patients after COVID vaccines?
Yeah, the Johns Hopkins study is super exciting. We did not do that through the registry. However, we do have a few resources from the foundation around COVID and the COVID vaccines. We had a really fantastic blog with Dr. Dean at Mayo asking about safety of the vaccine in post-transplant and immunosuppressed individuals. And so in those resources, we did link to the Johns Hopkins study. Unfortunately, that study filled up so fast, it didn't need our help recruiting. I know they're having trouble with all of the interest that they got in their study, which is such a fantastic problem to have. So we did not use the registry to recruit for that. But yeah, we're super interested to hear those results as they begin to come out and tell us some data on this vaccine and those kind of patients.
So we have asked all the questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat that we haven't asked or has been addressed. So
I really appreciate all your questions, everyone. Thank you.
Some great questions, right?
And please do email me also if you'd rather ask those one-on-one. I'm super interested to hear what you have to say and what questions you have, and I'm always happy to talk to you.
Awesome. So thank you, Elise, for helping all of us understand the impact of ADPKD, of the registry, and what the impact is having on research, and for answering all of our questions, and Chris, to you too for helping answer the questions. The PKD Foundation appreciates the opportunity to provide you with the best possible education. After the webinar, you will receive a brief survey. Please take some time and answer the questions in the survey. We really appreciate the feedback, and we will use that for future programs. Also, please send any additional questions or feedback to Elise at registry@pkdcure.org, and she will get back to you as soon as she can. On behalf of everyone at the PKD Foundation, thank you for joining us. Good night.
Good night, everybody.